Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and normally we do this on Saturday. Normally we do it on Saturday, but today, this weekend, we're doing it on Sunday, a Seahawks Sunday, with my good pal Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. And Jeff is sporting a new headset, man. We got a new mic, new headset. We're going to test this out today. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's crazy. There's a game in 4 days, but
I know. It's
like
it's not
that's
it's not just like any game either. It's not like a soft start to preseason. It's kind of like for some people, this might be one of the more appealing games of the whole year.
yeah, like it's a little bad. Like the Seahawks aren't playing any starters. That would be a little fun, but like preseason games, I know guys like me and you get into them, but for most people, I don't know. But for Pete and Gino to come back, Pete especially, McDonald's comments were pretty cool last night. I know you were there, but yeah, like the way it ended with Pete, the way it ended with Gino, like for them to come back for the first even Schneider said he was excited for that game. So I think it's going to be a really cool game for you to be at, and just for anyone to be at. Like I'm going to be staying up for it, and when I'm on lack of sleep, I'm going to be watching the whole thing. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to get a note from Dave Pearson saying that I shouldn't be asking about future games at the end of a scrimmage, but I couldn't help, just being in there in Lemon Field and thinking about in a few days that Pete Carroll is going to be in there. And it's interesting to me, like Mike McDonald does not take this notion of, you should talk to the team about these things, or like I think he tries to treat everything as business as usual and not spend much time. It's a preseason game, so it doesn't really matter, but it's going to be a little bit of a weird situation where, I mean, I would bet the loudest cheers of the night are going to be reserved for the guy on the sideline of the opposite team.
Yeah, like this is Pete's first time really being back in the stadium, and they never really got a chance to say goodbye because the whole thing happened so suddenly, and to a lot of people, it was still a pretty big shock, and some people are still recovering from it. And this might be, I don't know when the Raiders are scheduled to be in Seattle in a season game, so this might be the last chance. And yeah, I can't remember a lot of sports where that's going to happen. Because like, remember when Russ came back, like the Broncos fans were like ripping Seahawks fans for booing him. Like that didn't end very smoothly. And there's not a lot of times where like when Mike Holmgren went back to Green Bay, I don't know how testy, I can't remember that as well as you probably would, but I was trying to think of other situations like this, and there weren't many I could come up with. Like if Matt Hasselbeck came back in the preseason, I think when he was in Tennessee, he probably got it pretty good, but I don't know if he touched really as many in the way Pete did. It's just hard to think of another even comp.
I mean, if this wasn't the Pete Carroll game, I would not be going. I would certainly not be going. I would be live streaming at home. You and I would probably be talking to each other, or I would just be talking to people who were tuning in and doing that. Probably for the Chiefs game. I think that's the second game, if I'm remembering right.
I think
I will
so.
probably do that from home and not go in for it because, it's nice to just kind of do play by play and hang out with folks doing that. But I got to be there. The challenge is I'm going to be in the press box and I can't cheer in there. Like I really want to be there. I almost feel like I'm going to leave the press box and go find some place where I can go and just give Pete a quick standing O and cheer for him and not let anybody know about it other than the 5 people listening to this show. But I want to give that guy his due. He basically, I give him credit for probably like one of the top few moments of my life. Like people could laugh at that and think that's ridiculous, but the Seahawks winning a Super Bowl was like an ultimate bucket list moment for me. And I think for a lot of us that you have zero control over, like next to zero control, but like pretty much no control other than when you're screaming at the stadium and helping the team. So I'm so grateful for Pete. And I am in the camp of I'm hoping that Pete does really well this year. I hope the Raiders do really well. I hope they don't do better than the Seahawks. That's it.
Yeah, like I was in the camp towards the end of the Pete Carroll era that it was time, and it was like the last couple years. And even if you look at like, I don't want to like revisit the whole Pete thing today, but if you look at the full body of work and all the joy he brought me and what he did to Seahawks football, and I don't know if we'd be starting a podcast like this if it wasn't for Pete Carroll and what he did. And well, maybe me and you would have found each other, but we're pretty sick. But I don't know if we would have gotten Evan in the world or Josh Cashman or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And even your show the other night, just talking about like how cool the Seahawks were, and looking back at some of like the younger generations, what that was like growing up, who didn't grow up with like the 2005 year, and even me, who was kind of hardened in by the end. Like you can't not look back. I'm still a little conflicted about the Raiders this year. Just the Geno stuff has gone so annoying. It's
Yeah.
people on it, and it's just like, look, I know I've made my point about that, but even if you got to move on, like it's over. Geno orchestrated his way out too. Like cheer for the Seahawks, but so all my spite senses is kind of going wanting Geno to suck just because of those people. I should be cheering. Like my brother's a Raiders fan too. Like has been since 2002. Like hasn't seen a good year ever. It's crazy. You know they made the playoffs once since 2002.
That's unreal.
Made the playoffs once.
It's been like the definition of a poverty franchise over that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cardinals have made it to a Super Bowl in that time. Like it's crazy how bad the Raiders have been, because when I was a kid, the Raiders were pretty darn good. They still were a team that you kind of feared, whether it was like Jim Plunkett and, Art Shell and, they had physical players, Lyle Alzado. I mean, I wasn't a Lyle Alzado. I was that old, but still, like they have these really physical guys, and they've just been the definition of irrelevant for so long. And they're like one of the most storied franchises in the NFL. And it's kind of like the Giants have kind of become the Raiders a little bit, although obviously they've won a bunch of Super Bowls in that period of time. But since their last Super Bowl win, I feel like the Giants and Jets have been just like total jokes.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking about the other day? Just I don't know how well you remember. My brother, who's kind of like me, is a hardcore Raider fan. By the end of like Al Davis's, and Al Davis was like what you described. He was like the preeminent football guy. Kind of what's happening with Jerry Jones is very similar to what's happened to the Raiders, where once he got in his like 80s, he started making really weird decisions, and he was still way too involved. And that was the story of the week for a lot of people. But just what's happened to that franchise, they've been way better than the Raiders have been. But they're starting to get really weird, and guys are leaving there. It reminds me a lot of what happened at the end. But they're luckily Jones is trying to skip agents. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on. So I think the Jets are probably the better comparison. But
Yeah,
I don't know, man. That's a
well. I mean, so enough about the Raiders for a sec.
Yeah.
That game, and let's talk about what we're looking at in that game with a lens on what's happened so far in training camp. So, like, I'm curious as for you, as you're listening, reading, watching, what are you expecting to happen in this game? What are you kind of braced for? What are you excited about? What are you curious about?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there. I think the thing I'm excited about is Jalen Milroe. And I'm saying that as someone who did not want the Seahawks to draft him in the first 2 rounds. Where they got him was fine, but I've been saying this for years. The thing that makes preseason football fun is the rookie quarterbacks or the young quarterbacks. And the Seahawks really haven't had them since Russ. Like they haven't drafted anyone other than Magoo. And really, we've always found, even when Geno was the backup, it was kind of tough to watch Geno play, and not just Geno, where the long string of, you can even name all these backups they've had over the years, but they haven't really had that young drafted quarterback. Even like watching Trey Lance the other night was kind of fun in the Hall of Fame game. And I think the number one thing that makes preseason fun is that when Russ came in, like that was the most fun preseason any Seahawks fans ever had. And I have not been able to, I guess, see glimpses of Milroe, and I saw him in Alabama, but to watch this guy play, like I have no interest. I know Drew Lock's at a pretty good camp and sounds like he's doing well, but like I don't really care to watch him play. I'm very excited to watch Jalen Milroe.
Yeah. I think he's the top of the list. Obviously, the rookie class in general.
Yeah, dude.
Mike McDonald said starters aren't going to play. Now, I don't know what he means by starters. Does that mean that Nicky Minwari is not going to play? That would be surprising to me. Does that mean Gray Zabel is not going to play, that would be surprising to me. Like, why wouldn't you, like the offensive line especially, why wouldn't you want to get those guys as many snaps together as possible? I could kind of get my head around defensively. They all know what they're doing. Eamon Warrior is the one guy that maybe is still learning. But offensive line and the offense in general, dude, I could make a case Sam Darnold should be playing. Like this offense, as well as I do, Jeff, there is 100% chance that this time next year, assuming that Clint Kubiak's still here, he'll be saying, we're just so much further ahead than we were last year. And we feel like we know what we're doing now. And we're blah, blah, blah. You can't be wasting reps like that. And this is going to sound terrible, but I'm not as worried about injury in that regard. I think you've got to get reps, and I think you've got to get this offense as advanced as possible in as short a time as possible. Be ready for game one of the season against the division rival 49ers.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that they said that just all starters are sitting out. And I didn't hear the exact quote. I just saw how it was written. But I'm with you. I think the offense especially, they need game reps. And it sounds like they have been doing better, but it's interesting. Like the McVay school of teachers have really gone away from preseason. They started the trend. But some teams have actually started going back the other way. I don't know if you heard Dave Canales talking this week. And Dave Canales said the mistake he made last year is they didn't give Bryce Young any snaps in the preseason, and he wasn't ready to play. And there was a new offense, and they had to bench him. And they're said they're going to play him a lot this year. I know the Bengals, who have started slow really every year, they said they're going to give Joe Burrow a lot more snaps in the preseason. And they've had trouble with slow starts almost every year. They lost that terrible New England team in week 1 last year. And Seattle was so much new. And look, Charles Cross already out. So, like, if there's one guy you would have had to, like, bubble wrap, he's not even going to be able to play. Right. So I would like to see Zabel get some game snaps. Even just a series would help, just to get him out there. And maybe he means just the veterans. I don't know what the context is, but Zabel, I think the whole offensive line needs time. Like, maybe you don't want to play Cooper Kupp. Like, I can get that, but I think I would hope to see the offense play at least a couple series. And there's only 3 games now, and it used to be like a gradual buildup. I liked how it goes, but that way is gone. And so, yeah, I was a little discouraged by that. But for your Eamon Warrior point, I think he's going to play a bunch, because I don't think he's like a technical starter, and I think they want to get him up to speed. And I think they'll play like some of the defensive players. That's sort of how it's been the last, maybe like a Tyrese Knight, maybe a Murphy a little bit, maybe some of the younger guys, but like, if I don't expect to see like DeMarcus Lawrence, and that makes sense. But
yes,
yeah, I'm with you. I was a little discouraged to hear that. Hopefully that doesn't mean all offense is out. Like, I would play Darnold for sure.
Yeah, if you look at the general way that NFL teams seasons unfold, defenses usually are a little bit ahead of offenses to start, usually.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, and then the other part is offensive lines tend to, like, continuity and repetition and gelling and chemistry matters. And you've been rotating guys, so you haven't even set your offensive line yet. I don't love it. I don't love it. I hadn't honestly put much thought into it until we just started talking here, but I want this offensive line to get in as much rhythm as possible. This is a timing based run game. It's good for the running backs to get used to that. It's good for the linemen. It's good for the fullbacks. So we'll see. I'm not going to overreact and assume none of those guys are playing, but I assume when he's saying starters, like Ken Walker is not going to play. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Charbonnet doesn't play. I wouldn't be surprised, Sam Darnold's not going to play. And the Sam Darnold part, that doesn't bother me that much, because Drew Lock, you've got 2 quarterbacks, Drew Lock and Jalen Milroe, that could benefit from the reps, and whatever. It's definitely as good of a quarterback room from at least depth perspective as the Seahawks have had in a while. But yeah.
Well, I agree, but I think the biggest thing is, like, the right guard thing is so unsettled right now, and you want to see those guys play. And I think Timmy would benefit just from line calls and getting some chances to build chemistry beside him. And like, Zabel, obviously, you just want to see him get his feet wet because he's going to be out there at San Francisco trying to block those, well, mostly rookie defensive tackles. But yeah, I would be a little discouraged if you're just seeing all backup O-line. I think that.
Yeah, I wonder, Jeff, if you and I need to potentially take an L. Both of us, especially you, but both of us were optimistic that Christian Haynes was going to benefit from the switch in scheme and the coaching and the opportunity and the offseason, and he was going to come back and have a big jump in his second season. Now, Coach McDonald said he hasn't been playing lately because he's got a bit of a pec injury and he just hasn't been doing team drills. But I think I think even if he was healthy, I think this guy's losing that competition. And if he loses this competition after being given all sorts of chances last year, is there any hope left that Christian Haynes is going to develop into a player that this team wants on the roster long term?
Yeah, well, I was coming prepared to take the L. I don't remember you being as positive. Like we had a couple shows where you asked me for a hot take, and I said he was going to be good. So I get a lot right. That looks very wrong right now. And Brett Coleman went out, talked about his own blocking grades, and I was optimistic that this coaching staff, and the thing that's been weird about him is the way he was billed. He was a 5-year starter at UConn. I figured he would transition pretty quickly, and he would be more of a not the highest ceiling player. I never saw him as that. Like I wasn't begging for Christian Haynes last year, but I thought he was a high floor player. Which we've done so many shows on these offensive lines, like Tampa has Ben Bredesen on there, who's like he's not really good at anything, but he doesn't screw up, which is totally fine as your fifth guy. And really, the Seahawks are one player away from having a pretty competent line. Just from hearing your post report shows, and I get the sense he's just not showing much of anything, run blocking, pass blocking, and this was supposed to be the scheme for him. The other day it looked very alarming when they're like he's not even practicing, but now it's a pec injury. Yeah, it's hard to see year two, no real jump there after barely getting on the field in a scheme that was supposed to fit his skill set perfectly. Yeah, that's a looks like a bust right now.
That's where my head's at.
That wasn't the guy they wanted to draft. They
No.
settled for him. You've talked about it. They adjusted their strategy. A lot of draft media was very high on Haynes because of the same reason I did. They thought he was just a solid player, which this offensive line has needed for years. But you can't get in the field with the guards they had last year and then this year at right guard, which is not looking great right now. It's not good.
Well, but you know what, Jeff? It's not. It has the potential to be not unlike the Trey Lance, Brock Purdy situation, right? The 49ers blew it on Trey Lance multiple ways, depending on how you see it. But they bailed themselves out by drafting Brock Purdy, and he's turned out to be a good starter, right?
Yeah.
They drafted Christian Haynes. It's looking like he's not going to be the guy. That's what it's looking like right now. But they also, the year before, drafted Anthony Bradford, and they also last year undrafted free agent Jalen Sundell. If one of those guys turns into the guard you're talking about, a serviceable but not great player, it doesn't really matter if Christian Haynes doesn't work out, right? Like, do you feel differently about that?
No, that's dead on. But I don't know how good I feel about that. Just hearing stories of Bradford pass protector still make me queasy. And it sounds like he's had a pretty good camp, but I'm kind of hoping Sundell wins the job. I just prefer the higher floor player if we're hoping for that player I described versus the high ceiling guy that might have a really low floor. I think Sundell can be competent. And like, there's a reason they were targeting Will Fries anyway. I think the right guard spot was something we really saw as an area they can upgrade. And me and you were kind of hoping for Tate Radledge for that kind of reason. But yeah, if one of those guys, to answer your question, one of those guys wins the job, I don't care about Christian Haynes anymore. It was a 3rd round pick. But my guess, if I had to guess, is they go into next offseason, and that's one of the biggest needs on the team.
Yeah, I'm wading into very dangerous waters, Jeff. I know it. I'm not ignorant about it. I know how every time I say something positive about Anthony Bradford, I know everybody's like, geez, dude, come on. Stop trying to sell us on stop trying to make Anthony Bradford happen. Like, I get it. I get it. If I just saw what I've been seeing the past few years, I'd be in the same spot. I I don't want to forget that you and I were excited about him when he was drafted. We
Very
liked
excited.
the we liked the athletic profile, we liked the physicality. But what happened the first few years? Not only did he struggle in pass protection big time, which we know, and have penalties, but he was out of shape.
Yeah.
And he is now absolutely in different shape than he's been. And this is the best he's looked. Now, is that good enough? I don't know. Would I be shocked if he's named right guard and then 2 weeks later or 1 week later, we're like, oh my God, this is rough. We're going to really, no, I would not. I would not be shocked at all. But I'll tell you, Jeff, and I say this with a straight face, I would also not be shocked if mid-season we're like, he hasn't been that bad. Like, he and Abe are actually like a pretty good duo. And, you know, yeah, I don't hate it. Like, I absolutely think that's a possibility. If you had told me that before OTAs and mini camps, I would have laughed in your face. And so everyone laughing at me now, totally fine. I get it. But that's my honest take at this point.
Like I've heard your opinion on this, and I get what you're saying. Like his highest upside and his skill as a run blocker is better than anything any of the other guys can put on tape. And when they want to be a run-based offense, I get it. The floor is still. I just need to unsee what I saw the last 2 years because you're right. When we did our day 3 show in the draft, me and you were pretty bullish about that pick because of his RAS score and that athleticism, which looked insane. Just has not shown up on the field, and it might have been overweight, and then you add the penalties. If they can coach that out of him and they can get him competent, that's a totally competent player, and that could be even a plus player.
I'll
Yeah,
say this, Jeff. Part of my pass protection concerns are mitigated by I can count on one hand the amount of straight dropbacks I've seen in camp.
yeah.
The amount of times that they are play actioning, bootlegging, moving the pocket. I've barely seen him do shotgun, let alone just a straight drop back. And so the type of pass protection they're going to be asking these linemen to do compared to last year where every freaking play was a shotgun. Gino's going to be in the pocket. They never move the pocket once.
That's insane.
It is a super different level required of skill in pass protection than a year ago or 2 years ago. So I think that helps. And who knows? I mean, I guess all this comes back to if you don't know who the starter is, then how can you sit him? So I expect to see Anthony Bradford. I expect to see Jalen Sundell. I think I expect to see Olu Oluwatimi out there.
I think
And
Olu's going to be the starter, yeah.
and then you just I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do about Gray Zabel. I don't know what they're going to do about Abe Lucas. I wouldn't be surprised if they protect him. But the other guy, Jeff, that I'm they're right now they have Josh Jones as the replacement for Charles Cross, and hopefully it doesn't matter because Cross will be back by the time the season starts. But Mike Jarrell is a better player in my mind.
I've heard that from a few people.
I don't think it's that close.
Yeah, and I think their tackle depth is pretty decent. I think with Jones and Jarrell, when one of those tackles went out, we talked about this the last year. Stone Forsythe, I think, was like the worst ranked PFF player when he was the next man up.
Yeah.
And Jarrell was a guy from Finley. And 2 years ago, they had to sign Jason Peters, who now works in like development. Who like he shouldn't have been playing. And they had that guy Jake Curran a couple years ago, who completely cost them a couple games in Pete's last year. The vibe has been pretty good on some of their backup tackles, and especially with Lucas's injury history. Seeing those guys play, and if they look pretty competent, that's a good sign because you're always one injury away, and if you need to have good tackle depth, we saw it even in like the Super Bowl run where Russell Okung had to Paul McQuiston and Alvin Bailey and all these guys had to play some name drops. But yeah, I'm curious to see. Jarrell was a cool player coming out of school and totally raw prospect, and Yeah, I'm curious to watch him play on Thursday.
Who else? Who else is on your curious list, or what else are you curious to see in this game?
Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton is a guy
Good
like,
one.
again, when we did our show in April for the draft, I think my most visceral reaction was when they took Torrey Horton. I was calling for him like in the third round,
Mm-hmm.
and I just had lost hope at that point. Getting him in the fifth round, and then he had a pretty quiet start. There were some injuries he was coming through, and then all of a sudden, the last like 3 days, all the beat reporters down there, or even just fans down there, just like, this dude is mossing people, or this dude is like, Bray Henderson put out like he won, and so I think the hope is that he can push MVS off the field when the season starts, and that might be a little optimistic as a fifth round pick from a small school, but we've been saying for years the thing this franchise has been lacking, not just, it's been like the day three hits. They haven't really had them. You've talked about Puka so many times, and
Mm-hmm.
I asked someone who was down there, and they said Horton looks like a day two pick right away, and that's a big deal if that's true. I want to see that in live with the Bullets Go Live.
Yeah, his training camp has been the first time he's been on the field. They didn't play him in OTAs or mini camp just to be cautious. And the best way I can kind of describe it is someone who is testing the ice on a lake that they're going to try to cross. And he's like, the first few days, like he was kind of like, I think he's still getting used to trusting his body and being out there. But over the last few days, you can just see he's just playing football. And he looks like the kind of dynamic receiver that you'd expect. I still think expectations should be tempered for a rookie fifth round pick to come in here coming off of an injury. Like, I'm not saying he's going to have 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown season, but can he be a guy that impacts the game? Can he be a guy that's getting snaps and maybe is one of your higher targeted players, like top 3 targeted receivers? I think the answer is yeah. I think that's realistic. And I think they might have some situations, Jeff. Everyone's talking about MVS. I think they're gonna have some situations where they're internally saying, should it be JSN and Horton out there in 2 receiver sets, or JSN and Cooper Kupp? That's
Wow.
what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation.
I think I think that would be very important for this organization at some point, if he gets to that point, because I think right now, if you're looking like organizational needs beyond this year, obviously the guard, and I think like they might be in a situation where they're going to have to draft a receiver in the first round next year if things go the way some thought like a week ago. And that's a good thing because it is always easy to find receivers in the first round. But the edge rush, I think outside of edge rush, receiver, if they can find a guy internally with a fifth round pick, sort of like the Rams did, and kind of move their supposed to be a really good edge rushing class, that would be a big deal because I think that's one of their biggest organizational needs right now. And next year, like you said earlier, they're going to need to take this offense to another level. And so they're going to need to get more dynamic. They're going to need to get more speed. That's why I didn't mind it as much this year, because I think this is like a lay the ground roots kind of year. But if they can solve that along with some of the other needs early, that's important.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who's a good comp for him in terms of what kind of rookie season I think he could have. And I don't know yet. Like, I don't think he's going to have a Chris Olave season. I don't think he's going to have,
Yeah,
a Garrett Wilson season. I don't think he's going to have a JSN rookie season, even like maybe, but JSN had a better rookie season than people give him credit for. So I don't know, man. I'm really curious. That's a good one. What are you bracing for? What are some things you're like, oh man, I don't know if I want to see this. This part could be bad.
I'm worried that the running game is going to look terrible.
Mm.
And I think that's so important to what they're going to do. And I don't think we're going to see Charbonnet and Walker, and now McIntosh is out. I'm a little worried to see what that looks like. Edge rush, they're very top heavy with edge rushers. And if you pull Mafe and Hall, and Nwosu's not going to play, Lawrence is going to play, and you're looking at, I can't even name some of the guys. No Riley Mills, obviously, and it's not going to look very pretty. And if they have like Geno Smith and the starters playing, I think that's one of the areas. I think the linebacker group on paper looks pretty weak, but I think they'll be competent in a preseason game. But I think the running game and the edge rush could look pretty bad.
Yeah. I think the offense in general, it's hard when you're watching training camp to understand that what you're seeing is relative.
Yeah.
It's the offense is relative to itself. So like I'm like, oh, it's a better day than yesterday, or this is worse than 2 days ago. So you see that. It's also relative to the defense it's facing. And relative to the health, like all these things, right? And then you get into these preseason games and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I really haven't seen the offense sustain a drive all training camp, like get consecutive first downs. Is this a terrible offense? That's possible. And it's also possible that they haven't really been doing the running game the way you will in a preseason game. It's possible, depending on who they're playing and who they're going against, that oh wow, they're running the ball well and they're doing this bootlegs and getting some easy short completions, and this looks like a competent offense, and the tight ends are pretty good, and this is kind of exciting. I'm more braced for the first than I am expecting the second.
Well, it's funny you say that because I actually saw this like a minute before we went on, and like the Raiders had their scrimmage. The Pete Carroll did the scrimmage shit last night, and their offense like just went up and down the field, and a lot of their fans were all giddy about it. But I saw a couple of reporters be like, "The defense doesn't look very good." You look at that team, all of a sudden they got Jamal Adams in there, and if you think of like outs, their defenses look terrible. So it's like the inverse of what's going on with the Seahawks. And it did sound like it was a better week for the Seahawks offense. I know Brady's talked about that a
Mm-hmm.
lot. They've won a couple of the days, but yeah, I'm curious. That's where it's like it's a bummer that we won't see them kind of play against pretty crappy defense to see if they still look the same or if they're playing against what might be a top 5 defense in the NFL every day. So it's probably a little tough to judge, but you're seeing the exact opposite in Raiders camp where the offense apparently looks really good, but there's not outside of Crosby, there's not a lot of plays. So it's unfortunate because this would have been an interesting inverse test.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be, I mean, all eyes are going to be offense, honestly. Almost nothing that happens on defense is going
It's
to
relevant. Yeah.
shake my confidence about how good this defense is or how good Mike McDonald's going to be at calling this defense. Like that's
That's
not an issue.
And then the tough thing is you're going to turn on the game and you're going to see Drew Lock, Damian Martinez, Torrey Horton, Derek Young, Kobe White. Don't know what we learned from that.
Yeah. Well, if there's something to learn just about Clint Kubiak's play calling, there's something to learn about whether there's some cohesion. I think you should get plenty of Elijah Arroyo. I would expect.
Yeah.
I would think you'll get some AJ Barner, but you'll get a lot of probably Brady Russell. I think you'll get some Robbie Oots, some Eric Saubert. Like I think all the tight ends will probably get some reps. And I don't know, man. The receiving room, I think thins out quite a bit, but I think it's we'll see plenty of those guys.
Yeah. I just have visions of last year when we saw Grubb's offense against the Browns, I think it was. And you saw the starters for like one drive, and like it was like the nicest looking drive you've ever seen. At that point, we were all so giddy about the offense, and things tend to mislead you in these preseason games. So I'm going to be careful with what I see.
It's very true. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff going on elsewhere for a second. You and I always are checking in, and the 49ers are the Seahawks' first opponent. So I'm always keeping an eye on the 49ers because I hate the 49ers anyway. But what's kind of caught your attention about their training camp so far?
So wide receiver still a big problem there. And Albert Breer was down there and he had the Charles Cross note. He said Ayuk is not going to be ready until midseason at the earliest. So it was kind of expected on the pup list, but that's a big deal. And Juwan Jennings has been banged up and he's in question for week 1. And they signed another, I think you gave the ... tweets to who they're working out or
Robbie Chosen.
Yeah, they've just been pulling in like fringe guys, like St. Brown's brother was there for a day, and then someone else like that was signed. They had this horrible looking workout of like fringe players that haven't been around for years. It was like Andy Isabella. I don't know if you remember that guy from Arizona. Mm-hmm. And if you pull, again, you're pulling Ayuk out already. If you pull Jennings out week 1, and Pearsall did come back, and it sounds like he's doing well, but It's Pearsall, Cowing, who's been banged up, and it's crazy. And the other thing is the Micah Williams buzz has kind of slowed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking about with Christian Haynes, Alfred Collins, you put out a tweet in our group the other day, and I've seen this from Graham was talking about it on with you that he's had a rough start there, and it doesn't sound like his camp's going well. He's apparently getting outplayed by an undrafted guy. He's behind because he was injured. That was a big deal for a team that is really weak at D tackle. It sounds like CJ West, alternatively, is having a pretty good camp, but Alfred Collins was a second round pick who I remember you were uncomfortable with him because you were uncomfortable with him. I can't remember who liked him. I think it was Brugler, but
Brugler liked him a lot. And
yeah, I don't know. How do I remember that? But that was a bold pick at the time and really important for that defense. And if he's not up to speed, especially week 1, where Grant said it's a great time to play them, that's a big deal for the Seahawks.
It is. I mean, I'm like, let's be clear. I am overweighting this first week more than probably is reasonable. I think that if you lose at home to the 49ers, it's a big deal. I really, really think it's a really bad way to start the season. Conversely, if you beat the 49ers at home to start the year, where a lot of those folks think that they're just going to roll over Seattle and Seattle's a team that shouldn't be taken seriously, I think it just solidifies some perspectives. And people can say it doesn't matter what perspectives there are out there, or narratives. You play the game as every week, but it is something that you end up fighting. Like it's just this third party that's out there, and if it's either helping you, it's wind in your sails, or it's fighting it. And so anyway, with that all said, the Alfred Collins stuff sounds pretty bad. It sounds like he's been giving up on plays after he's blocked. He, unlike Nicky Manwari and Elijah Arroyo, he didn't practice during the spring. Like he didn't report when he didn't have his contract. Those guys practice. So there's also some questions about whether he's in shape. CJ West is playing really well. And the comparisons I'm hearing are DJ Jones, a guy that Seahawks fans remember, like just a very disruptive player, like a guy that I think you and I both liked. I think it was really smart of the 49ers to double up at defensive tackle. And even if they just hit 1 out of 2, that's certainly better than having Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens be your defensive lineman. But then the other thing, Jeff, that's kind of got my attention is like Colton McKivitz, their right tackle, talking about, I want to be a Pro Bowler this year, which is weird. You don't usually get players talking about personal goals like that. And then the next day I'm reading about how Nick Bosa like just terrorized him for like sack after sack after sack. And everyone's like, oh, Nick Bosa played this great practice. I'm like, yeah, but isn't that the guy that just said he was going to be a Pro Bowler and is giving up like 7 sacks in a scrimmage or like whatever? So it sounds like Dominic Pooney also has had his hands full at times with Micah Williams, which is like, okay, maybe that means good things about Micah Williams. Maybe it means bad things about Dominic Pooney. I've heard Nick Bosa sometimes giving Trent Williams problems. Maybe that's about Nick Bosa. Maybe that's about Trent Williams, who's like 3,000 years old, finally like succumbing to father time. So I continue, like, it sounds like Brock Purdy's playing well. It sounds like Ricky Pearsall stepped forward, but there's the safety situation there sounds really unsettled. I think overall it seems like there's a new injury every single day.
Yeah. Like Grant Cohen was tweeting about Trey Brown having to play a lot at outside corner, an old friend of ours. And it did not sound like he's had a particularly good camp. It sounds like he's getting beat over the top lot, which was one of the recurring issues in Seattle, that and penalties. And it does not sound like corner is in great shape either.
Yeah. You think about that compared to what we're talking about with the Seahawks, where it's like, okay, will this scheme work? It matters when the quarterback is a question. Like, I'm not going to undersell that. But you can kind of go down the line. Like, the questions we have about the Seahawks are like, is this guy going to be good enough? Is he going, like, is this rookie going to step forward? Like, Cooper Kupp at his worst case scenario is still going to be a productive, useful player. He's going to be like Tyler Lockett last year. Is kind of like, like he's a good guy to have on your team. He's just not going to be a world beater necessarily. But I feel like there's just not near, like, let me put it this way. I was listening to Michael Sean Dugar, on with Robert Mays. I don't know if did you hear that?
No, I haven't listened yet.
The way Michael Sean Dugar put it is that the Seahawks are trying to run a parlay on offense. They're changing the scheme. They're changing like the coordinator. They're changing the quarterback. They're changing their quote number one wide receiver. And if all of those things hit, then they'll be in good shape. If one of those things doesn't hit, you lose the whole thing. Like, and that's kind of his view. And I don't totally agree, but I think it's a reasonable way to characterize the situation. But then I'm like, okay, but the 49ers and the Rams and the Cardinals are also, especially the Rams and the 49ers, are trying to run their own parlays. It's different, but there's some pretty serious like bets that they're making that have to turn out for those teams to be good.
Yeah, we just talked about 4 major position groups of San Francisco, where one of those, if the whole secondary just tarnishes, that's a huge problem. Or if the receivers can't really run the Shanahan offense, if there's a lot, and then San Francisco and LA, you got a 37-year-old quarterback with back problems who can't get on the field right now. And so, I'm sure Mays would tell you, oh, Jimmy Garoppolo will be great, but there's a huge difference. Matt Stafford is so much to what that team does, and Matt Stafford does not practice in training camp with Devontae Adams yet. They did OTAs. They have not practiced together. And again, all indications from McVay are he'll be back. Well, back is the key word. Back injuries are weird, man.
Yeah.
Back injuries are weird.
Yeah.
Like, they're very serious. Anyone who's covered sports knows you can't predict. There's no timelines for back injuries. You don't know when it started out. It'll be a week. Now the timeline keeps changing, and we're now 5 weeks away. And that's a serious bet that you brought up every time you did these previews, and you seem to get ignored by everyone. Even when Mays was on with you or the Rams beat writer, you asked them all, am I missing something here? It's been I imagine it's a pretty scary situation for them down there.
What's your take on the Stafford news? Is that like on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a Rams fan, 10 being you should be freaking out, like this is really, really bad. 1 being like ignore it, not an issue at all. Where do you think people should be if you're following the Rams about the Stafford situation?
I'd probably be at an 8.
Really? That high? Why?
I think Stafford's so important to what they do, and back injuries are the kind of thing that can end careers. And if it was like last year was the elbow and it took him, he was not the same player a couple of years ago with the elbow, but back injuries, if he gets hit in the back and that flares up again, that's a big deal. I think the nature of the injury more so than the timeline, that would make me nervous. Back injuries are just like we saw what happened to Tiger Woods in golf with the back injury.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a totally different sport, but if you don't have Stafford, you don't have a team. Like we saw what happened to them a couple of years ago, where they ended up getting Baker and he was functional, but when some of the other guys had to play quarterback, it was pretty bad. And so I would be very nervous until I hear a positive report. I think the rest of the team, it sounds like things are going pretty well, but that would make me really uncomfortable, especially with an older quarterback who's been banged up his whole career.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, Jeff. I've been thinking about it like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 for the most part. Like, they're just resting their veteran quarterback. They feel like he knows what he's doing. He can walk in tomorrow and be a great player, so they don't have to worry about it. But then when he missed the timeline that McVay initially set, when he was supposed to play in like the joint practices, which they value, they don't even care about preseason games. And then he's not there. And Jordan Rodriguez comes out and says, this is kind of unusual for the Rams.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, and then he's seeing a specialist. And I'm like, whoa, this reminds me like Christian McCaffrey last year. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here, but it's like, oh, McCaffrey will be back. He's a running back. They're just resting him. And then what happens? He misses basically the whole year. I don't think that's what's going to happen with Stafford. But to your point, you said like Tiger Woods in golf, it's not comparable. But you play golf. What's golf? It's a lot of rotation and it puts a lot of torque on your back. And what is quarterbacking? It is a lot of rotation, and people talk about getting hit. Sure, that's part of it, but you're putting a lot of strain on your back, and depending on what the issue is, if it's in the his nerves, pinched nerve, who knows what it is.
Yeah.
That could be a lingering issue, and it's hard to protect yourself from falling down, from impact, from torque to be able to play. So probably nothing, but from your perspective, maybe likely to be something.
I think the thing that's made Stafford so good relative to some of the other older quarterbacks is, like you saw with Rodgers and even Brady to an extent, and definitely with Manning, they just hated getting hit by the end. And Rodgers the last couple of years has done, like, when he's near a sack, he's just a totally different player than what he used to be. Stafford has been incredible. He takes hits, he gets beaten up. He's a tough guy. And like a lot of some of those like California, Georgia kids, like they're not like that. And he's been really impressive. But if your back is messed up, I wonder if that changes it. And so, look, once you get the adrenaline going and the game gets going, maybe you can't feel it till the next day, but it's just something lingering. I would be very nervous about that for an older player.
Yeah.
Who we've had questions about him even when he was healthy. We had questions about him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't help it when I see people like, the Rams are their Devontae Adams is doing really well, or the receivers are doing well. I'm like, have you seen their cornerback room? I'm not convinced that's a good cornerback room. But I want to switch gears for a second, Jeff, and talk about something else. I want to talk about Micah Parsons with you because we haven't had a chance to talk about that yet. And I want to connect it to a conversation we had on Real Hawk Talk this week, which I know you weren't a big fan of, and neither were most people. Actually, not most people. A lot of people were like, what are you talking about, aura? The Seahawks clearly seem to be listening since they tweeted out one word, aura, last night with a captioning a Nicky Manwari. That was pretty funny. But the connection I want to make, Jeff, is I don't think I did a good job of framing the conversation with Fanon and Evan on this, but Fanon's brought up the aura thing. I don't care if someone's dynamic or not, but what if I told you that the Seahawks don't want to bring in Micah Parsons because he's a headache. He seems pretty clearly like a headache over the years. And so what if they're like, we intentionally want to have a drama-free environment. We want to have players that are good guys that are bought in, and we're going to intentionally not pursue top talent if it comes with baggage. Then how do you feel about this kind of approach that the team might be taking of, maybe we're not going to have the big aura guys. We're just going to have the really hardworking, talented players.
That makes me a little less comfortable. And I think you need a couple of those guys with their screws loose to be a great team. And I think you think of every great team in the league, I know the drama 3 thing keeps coming up, but Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin and Earl, Earl had Michael Bennett, Earl had more screws loose than anyone, but my God, he was a good football player.
Yeah.
Look, you can't have the perfect, I get they like the drama thing, the no drama thing. And look, they would have good intel on Parsons from DeMarcus Lawrence, and they got to pay the guy $45 million a year. So if they're uncomfortable, I can swallow that. But if that's their whole outlook on team building, I just think you're setting up to be average. And I think you need a couple guys. Some of the best players in the league, like Lawrence Taylor, had more screws loose than anyone. I was saying that was some of the reasons I liked Jared Verse last year. He's not like one of those guys where he's a bad guy. It sounds like a great guy, but the way he talks and the way he acts, and he seems a little crazy on the field. That was part of the thing that made me appeal about him. And I wouldn't like that approach to team building. It's a little too Tim Ruskell-like. And obviously don't want to go that far where you just get bad football players who are good guys. But I don't think you should just rule out anyone because they have drama. You need some guys like that. Seahawks have a lot of guys that are good. They don't have a lot of guys that are great. And if they don't get great players, they're kind of going to be stuck in this upper echelon of purgatory.
Yeah. For me, where it gets uncomfortable, Jeff, is if you are knowingly avoiding the best football players. If you're knowing, not all of them, if you're knowingly saying we're going to make a decision that's not about football, this guy, we know he's better than anyone that we have on our roster, but we're not going to add him because of his personality. That says a couple of things. one, it says that you're not making a football-based decision, which I have some concerns about.
Yeah.
Two, you're basically saying, I don't necessarily trust our locker room, our coaching staff, our, team in general to be able to handle it. And for all the things that Pete Carroll did not do over the last 10 years he was here, he was never afraid to welcome anyone into that locker room because he was sure that he could handle it and he could make it work. And not everybody can, but it's something that's at least in my mind now, man. Like I want the best football players on the team. I want guys that I want to cheer for as well. But I want a team that ultimately, like, you put Micah Parsons on this team, Jeff, it's the best defense in the NFL, and I don't think it's close.
Oh yeah, when that story came out the other day, I was calculating all these trade scenarios, and look, I understand some of the questions about him, but to get a guy like him is impossible for where the Seahawks are right now. We're going to be drafting 18, and they're going to be drafting 16, and they don't have a lot of great players. We've done this for 3 years, and he is a all-pro, blue chip in every way. That could takes you from good to great, and that's the hardest thing to do. And really, other than Leonard Williams and maybe Witherspoon, they just don't have a lot of guys that really change the game every time they're on the field. And Witherspoon doesn't just because of the position he plays. Like, you can avoid him in a whole game. Parsons is just like we saw what Nick Bosa has done for the 49ers, what Aaron Donald did. Parsons is like one of those guys. And so I would have moved heaven and earth to get a guy like that on the team, especially with a defensive head coach. But yeah, I hope if it's more price point, or I hope it's just not they're scared that he has drama to him, because maybe when you're setting a culture that works, but I don't know. I think that's I don't think you can build a whole team like that.
I think here's the counterpoint. And if I was making the case for them against what I said, it'd be, well, what about Trey Hendrickson? What about TJ Watt? What about Max Crosby? Like, what about Myles Garrett? Like, there's plenty of guys that are the best at that position that don't come with that kind of baggage and are great locker room guys, and that every coach wants to have. Wait, so what'd you say?
I said, so why don't you trade for Trey Hendrickson?
I know, like, so like,
yeah, no.
That would maybe be the counter, is like, you don't have to be an asshole to be good.
No. Yeah.
I don't like shutting yourself off to people with potentially big personalities.
But I think the reason those guys become available is more likely because of the baggage.
Mm-hmm.
And look, and I get it. They struck out on Percy Harvin. That was a disaster. And Jamal Adams, another guy with kind of baggage, was a disaster. The way things ended with DK and Geno, I'm sure people will be upset to hear that, but I don't think that the front office was thrilled with how the last year of that relationship was. And I'm sure Brady's mentioned it several times. And I think that's part of the reason they've done a lot of what they've done this offseason. And I think the draft class has helped give them some sizzle a little bit again, but I hope that's just more of a setting culture, and it's not just the way they evaluate personnel every year now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a fun one to kind of pay attention to. Especially, I mean, if the team feels flat and uninteresting, if that happens, then this is going to become a larger topic. If it's like locked in and good and disciplined and hard to play against, then awesome. Like, let's be Baltimore. That's fine.
Yeah, like when you guys were talking about Aura the other night, I was thinking of like the 2005 Seahawks with Darryl Jackson and Sean Alexander and Joe Jurevicius, and that team didn't have a lot of aura. Like, Lofa Tatupu was a really cool player, and the offensive line were seriously badasses, but that was a pretty like vanilla group of guys. They were just efficient, and I don't know. I can't imagine any Seahawks fan didn't love Matt Hasselbeck in those years.
Yeah,
I don't think you need to be like. I think obviously we're a little spoiled. That was one of the coolest teams we've ever seen, and expecting every team to look like Pete Carroll's USC team, it's just not realistic. Not. It's. I think that we were kind of spoiled during the early part of that era, not just with the players, but everyone's like, when are we going to get the next Michael Bennett? When are we getting Cam Chancellor? That just doesn't happen. And
no.
to get a team that cool, like, if Jalen Milroe hits, there's your aura. Like, I agree
Yes.
with what Evan said.
Yes.
And I think once they get a franchise quarterback, or if the defense becomes great, like, who's not going to want to cheer for that team? So,
yeah. Yeah, that's where I think there's a misunderstanding. I don't think I don't care if the team has personality if they're good. Like,
yeah.
that doesn't matter. For me, the question is more this other thing of are you shutting yourself off to talent acquisition because you have this philosophy on what kind of personality that they have to have? And we'll see. We'll
Well, it's
see. We got
interesting because they wanted to keep DK and Geno,
right.
and they end up stepping out. So I don't know if we can say like that's their intention here, because they did want to keep them, and I think they're enjoying probably. They're like, I think Brock Heward said it on. It's like their first low maintenance quarterback in years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they're sitting back and like, this is nice. Like, we're not dealing with all this.
But I don't give a shit if it's nice for them. Sorry,
That's not
John.
how I
Sorry,
feel.
Mike. I don't
If
give a
Darnold
shit if
comes
your
out and he
jobs are
sucks,
easier.
yeah, if Darnold sucks, then I'd rather have we're all going to look back at that trade or trade off, and we're going to be like, you guys blew it.
Yeah. Like, I want good football players. I want good football. I also want them to be good guys because I do like who I choose to rep, wear a jersey, and like I care about who they are as well. But I want them to be absolute badass football players. So we'll find out. We got a couple super chats here before I let you go. Detail oriented. Bobby says, Brian, I want to thank you for always sharing your view and unique perspective. I don't always agree with 100% with you, but I do absolutely love how you're not afraid to push the envelope and give a view few others will voice. Well, I appreciate that. And I would be shocked if anyone agreed with me 100%, because you'd be wrong a lot if you agreed with me. I'm often wrong. So Full Throttle Gadgets. Hey, guys, you both rock. I noticed that when I was at FanFest, there seemed to be more 12s than last 2 to 3 years of the FanFest. The aura seems to be increasing. What do you guys think? I honestly can't remember the amount of people that were in there past years. From my view in the press box, it was like a fifth full, I would say, maybe, in Lumen Field. So it wasn't like a lot of people there, but maybe you're right. I honestly haven't paid attention, so I don't know. And I guess, Jeff, you don't have a point of view on this one.
Yeah, I can't really add any perspective there.
All right, last one is something for you. This is from Noah Berman, who's been a member for a year and a half, 16 months, almost a year and a half. Says, thanks for all the hard work and a summer full of Hawks content. How much would Jeff give up for Micah Parsons, and how would he fit in the locker room?
So I love the idea of limiting the draft pick compensation by including Boye Mafe. I think you were talking about that in your show the other day. And I think the 1, the 2 in Mafe felt right to me. I think you're going to have to pay 2 2s if Jerry Jones did. 2 1s. And look, me and you are draft guys. I don't want to go the next 2 years first round picks. We spend so many time doing sims. But if push came to shove, like, I would do the 2 1s if I had to. I think he's that good. And so the locker room questions, I don't know. I don't know enough about him to have a judgment. Aiden Dirty is going to know him better than anyone. He was his defensive line coach, DeMarcus Lawrence. Obviously, things didn't end great with those two, but they're going to know things a lot better than I do. Sean and his guys for sure scouted him, even though they never first-round pick that year. So they've brought in a lot of guys with connections to their coaching staff. Lawrence, Darnold, Jake Peets was with Cooper Kupp. They've had a lot of connections. So I can't say how he would fit in. That's kind of above my skill set.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for all the fun of the discussion, I think that there's next to 0% chance he's going to get traded to anybody.
Yeah.
And if he did, the chances the Seahawks would be the team to go after him. I don't know, like probably not, but has any other team made more big name trades over the last 15 years than the Seahawks? I mean, if you look,
it doesn't seem like it.
Like Percy Harvin, Jimmy Graham, Jamal Adams, Dwayne Brown, Jadeveon Clowney, Sheldon Richardson, Leonard Williams. Like, they've made a lot of, I don't know, anyone else has done that many big name trades.
Yeah, the Rams did Stafford, and they did
Ramsey,
Von Miller, and Ramsey, and Beckham. But I think if you put like the whole volume, the Seahawks, would be the most. It's part of John Schneider's MO. He likes making those moves, and I'm sure Pete loved making those moves. And so those two together, when those guys would come available, I imagine they would get very giddy. And so, no, I think it's be the Seahawks and the Rams. And the Niners did McCaffrey, and they've done some other ones, but it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Seattle's been such like a, in the national perspective, not like a big time team to a lot of people, and they've made a lot of swings.
Yeah, they have. All right, we got one more super chat that came in from Polly. He's been a member for 3 months. Says, would you add K9 or Charbonnet to fill their need? Like, would you trade K9 or Charbonnet to get Micah Parsons? Yeah, either one. I think like I would trade any running back pretty much for Micah Parsons. Like, not. I'm assuming you're talking about other things in addition, but yeah, neither one of those guys would give me hesitation to get rid of.
No, it's Walker's in the last year of his deal, and Evan's been quiet this week, but he's hurt again.
Yes.
Or they're resting him, and it sounds like Charbonnet's Clint Kubiak hand picked him out on Bump and Stacy the other day, and Brady happened to write about him yesterday. So I don't know if it's great to be Evan Hill right now in that take. So
I think it's pretty good to be Evan Hill based on the videos he's been.
Oh, okay, I take that back. He's living a much better life than I am on this weekend. I'll say that.
All right, Jeff, man, thank you for coming on. We'll see you this week. And if you haven't already, make sure you follow Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. Great stuff. Hopefully the new headsets. Give us some feedback if Jeff's sound was better today. I know people have been challenged with his sound over the time. So we got him top of the line headsets. Hopefully they better quality sound for all of you. And hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure you like, subscribe, click the bell to get notified when we go live. Make sure also you go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get access to ad-free audio, as well as access to the Discord channel, and verified over at hbtix.com. hbtix.com. The game's coming a few days away. You could go see Pete Carroll. There are literally dozens, if not there's dozens and dozens of 49ers tickets as well, but Raiders versus Seahawks preseason tickets available up there. Go see and cheer Pete Carroll. Go watch this new Seahawks team. Go watch Jalen Milroe's first game in Lumen Field. Just go to hbtix.com. I get no money. I take no fees for it. In fact, it's costing me money every month to run this app. I just want to get as many Seahawks fans in seats as possible. This is where Seahawks fans can go to sell their tickets to other Seahawks fans. So big week, game week starts tomorrow. I will see you all very soon. And until then, have a great rest of your Sunday. I'm Brian M. Hazard. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Morning.